Hello, everyone. Today we have a really great friend and our guest, Juliet. She is the CEO of her own consulting business, and her career takes very interesting turns from the early on and start with the dream of going to medical school. So today we're going to explore how she shift her career goal and how she get it from point A to B and to where she is right now. Okay, welcome, Juliet.
Thanks, Serene.
Could you briefly tell everybody about yourself?
Sure. Well, currently I have a consulting business. My focus is on leadership development for scientists and their organizations, but that started off from actually being a scientist in the laboratory and then transitioning into leadership development consulting. So from A to Z, but there's lots of curves in between.
Yeah, so you told me, I actually really love the story you told me about you always had this dream become a doctor. And all of a sudden one day you discovered this is no longer your dream, or it's still a dream, but maybe it's not perfect for you.
Yeah. So, way back when you're figuring out what do you want to be when you grow up, doctor was definitely on high on my list. And I don't know if it was because I just thought it was cool or just the expectation that you grow up to either be a doctor or a lawyer was there behind it, right? So I pursued that field for a long time through high school and when I entered college. But I also wanted to study other things. So psychology was really an interest of mine, and that's what I majored in at the end of the day. But and I took all the sciences and the required coursework. But when I volunteered, I found out that I didn't necessarily want to be a doctor.
Mhm.
Mostly not because I had an interest in the medical sciences, but maybe not working with people who are sick all the time. And it's not easy to do that, right? You have to have a certain willingness to be there and seeing people who are hurt and who need emotionally, physically need your attention, your help. So it was tough when volunteering. It really opened my eyes.
I think that's a very, very good point. We always have a passion and we have a dream, but the moment we experience by ourselves, it might be a totally different story. Being a doctor is so honorable and a lot of people want to help others. But I have another student just like you. She really wanted to be a doctor, but one day working at the ER as a volunteer, she realized how hard it is. And sometimes her mind just cannot take in that much pain and how to talk or how to communicate with the patient's family. And she's like, I don't think I can be a doctor that tell people bad news. I can't say it. So I think here a takeaway is if we have something that we really want to pursue, try it out in different format, like volunteer, internship, or talk to someone who already work in that field for many years, then you would know what is it really like to be in that industry or to work in or shadowing a doctor for one day. You really understand what it would be like. All right. So I personally really like that story because I think that's the one aha moment for you working in that hospital as a volunteer.
Mhm.
Um, and so back to school a little bit, what was your first major choice? Like, how did you make the choice to choose that major?
Yeah, psychology was a little bit different. It wasn't the biology, chemistry, the basics that you needed to get into medical school. And I liked it. I liked trying to understand people and things like that. Actually, through volunteering, I volunteered in many places, surgical units, cancer units. But the one that was most interesting was probably the psychiatric unit. And I think that was and the geriatrics, Alzheimer's unit. I think I was more curious about the person and the behavior and the science behind it. And I
Mhm.
think at the end of the day, that's what I pursued, trying to do research in psychology, I went into the lab and started to understand hormones and the chemistry of it, neuroscience behind it, and try to put those pieces together. So while I was in college, I worked as a researcher. They paid me to my tuition. They paid for some of my textbooks and stipend, things like that. And I got some grant funding, and that's how I paid my way through college.
Mhm.
So yeah. Plus, with that, I tried to, try to pair the psychology with the medical school. But again, at the end of the day, I decided to veer off it more into the graduate studies. So,
Mhm.
mhm.
So from what I've been hearing, you started choosing your major in psychology. And how did you move from that area specifically to the e-learning, to the learning and development and leadership and coaching specifically?
Okay. So that's a big jump, right? So it took many years. I studied psychology and neuroscience. I studied some graduate studies, but applied that into biotech and pharma industry. So I studied how do you create drugs and medicines in order to help people. Um, I transitioned. While I was working in the field, I realized that as scientists, we're very technically trained, right? We know all about the science. We push all of the boundaries of science to the cutting edge, but we don't focus on how do we develop ourselves, how do we work with other people, or how do we lead other people.
Mhm.
And when I realized that, then I started looking for resources to help others and myself, and I thought this is just too good. I needed to share this. So I worked at Johnson Johnson for a number of years and brought in a lot of resources to help the scientists and myself to do better professionally. And
Mhm.
when we realized that these things really resonated with scientists, I thought, this is something I need to bring forward in my own career, that I could do something with this. So I moved into the HR side, human resources side of the company, and started to learn how do they develop employees. And now I apply a lot of those learnings to how do I help scientists become stronger leaders.
Mhm.
So big steps, big, and kind of, I didn't maybe know exactly where I was heading and what I was doing, but there was a passion and a need, and I felt this is what makes me happy. So let's
Mhm.
try it.
This is actually an area that a lot of people didn't think about because people always think scientists are the smartest. They are smart for sure, but I did have this one session, a workshop, helping a bunch of really great PhD, like doctoral student at Columbia, to coaching them how to do a good presentation of their research.
Mhm.
Even though they're so smart, it's like a marvelous world in their mind, but it's hard. There's like a wall between showing this world to people. Like maybe other people couldn't understand. So what you're doing is helping them to present this great world or this great vision they see to normal people. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, they are the depths of knowledge and what they're willing to do to understand something is just amazing. And I feel like the passion is for me is really to help empower them to share what all this massive and amazing knowledge that they have, and make it something useful to what we can understand, and how can we use it to help others, right? So.
Mhm. So talking about like doctoral degree and PhD degree, I know you used to have like different plans for your academic path. So, and I really like one story you shared with me. You said if earlier you would know there are so many different career paths with a PhD degree, you would rethink the whole application process, right? Could you share that with us?
Sure. So there's a lot when you're trying to get your PhD or your MD, it's a full commitment, right? And you have to have a certain love for the work that you do in those areas, right? So I started off wanting that MD, and then when I volunteer in hospitals, I realized in real time what I would be doing. But there's also lots of different jobs in using your MD that I didn't know much later until I started working in corporations that doctors and in pharmaceutical industries have a completely different job, right? A bigger scale where you're helping develop medicines and maybe not so much in the time in the hospitals. So jobs that you never would have thought of or realized. So I didn't know about those. So it's important to really dig into, what can you do with a higher degree? The same thing with my, when I pursued graduate studies, I pursued a PhD in
Mhm.
neuroscience, but I found that it wasn't specific me my love. It was more that I wanted to apply what I understood about people and behavior and try to help them,
Right.
and not so much dig so deeply into studying all the dynamics of it. Although the research is fascinating, I just couldn't find my specific area in neuroscience at that time. So but that didn't stop me from pursuing a career in trying to bridge the gaps between different disciplines, right? So melding psychology and learning and development and applying it, understanding scientists and how do they think and what motivates them, all these things and experience put together really helps me to help my clients, help the scientists that I work with. So experience counts a lot. And degrees are very important, but you have to be happy with the one you choose.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think there's so many mystery about a PhD degree. Like, why should I get it and how? A lot of people don't know, like, in the US, actually, you can go for your PhD when you finish in your undergrad. You don't have to get a master degree and then go for PhD. So a lot of people don't know that. And what I discovered, so I went to UPenn for a session that I share what I have found in VR and different education technology with this certain group. And then when I got there, it is actually a PhD program for CLO. But
Mm,
all these students there, they're all CLO or future CLO of different companies. So for them, PhD degree is actually something that help their career. They already know what they're doing and they know where they're going, and this PhD is a plus.
mhm.
So different career or different stage of the career, PhD can mean different things. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be my life as a PhD student. Like
Right.
especially in some country, like in China, there is a bias against the female PhD students. They think
Mm.
female PhD is a third gender because they're way too smart. So I just think that's so many mysteries like about PhD. It's actually just a degree, right?
Right, exactly.
Just depend on how you use it. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely. PhD is a tool. I mean, and a very rigorous training system, right? So that's what, going in to get your PhD is more about finding something new, discovering something new, and really pushing the boundaries. So the first thought when you're thinking is I have to understand everything about a particular topic, and
Mhm.
then trying to discover something new about it. That's the training of the PhD, and it's just amazing, when people who go through it know everything about a particular topic and know what we don't know and try to discover that. So it's not for everyone. I mean, that's not something that every one of us can do to really go that deep, that far into a specific area. But when they do, and they bring it back to their workplace or bring it back to their lives or explore it further for the good of humanity, that's really pushing the bar, really cutting edge for all of us. So
Mhm. And back to learning industry. So Julia and I actually met in learning conference with a bunch of learning people. So we all understand each other. We have our own inside jokes. But out of the circle, people like, what is the learning industry? What do you guys exactly do? Are you a teacher? Are you like design curriculum? Like what is learning? And right now, a lot of people want to change their career and explore different career paths. So could you tell us like what is your like perspective of what's learning people do and what is learning industry?
Sure. I can't explain how amazing it's been to tap into the learning and development community.
Mhm.
I had no idea what it was before, I kind of stepped my toe into it. As a scientist, things were pretty clear. I knew a path. I had to understand and discover new things, but to translate all of that knowledge into the world, that's what the L&D community does. How do we take all of that information and help others to learn what it is and how to use it? Right? And there's nothing simple about it, whether you're an educator or a technologist. The L&D community is so broad too, that you have people who are coaches who are there to help you understand what do you know, what don't you know, and help you stay accountable to your goals, from people who are deep into the technology of how do we measure, collect information, and then bring it out into the world and apply it. It ranges so wide. It's just amazing. And so when you get a group of a community of L&D practitioners together and the varied perspectives they have, it's just exciting, because there's just so much to do and so much to help different people all over the world in doing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. So
yeah.
one thing about I think a lot of people is confusing is learning means HR. Because some
Mm.
companies, learning department and HR department are actually mixed a little bit. So they're saying, oh, they're training new people to get into the company. Is that what HR does? So I would say not exactly, right? So
Mhm.
that's where a lot of people get confused about
Mhm.
learning and development and then HR. And a lot of people ask me what are the job titles if you want to get into learning development field. Just like Julia said, there are coaches, there are learning designer. There's all sorts of title, and you can become a chief learning officer, the COO, right? Um,
Mhm.
and for those who want to get into this industry, do you have any suggestion, like what kind of qualification they need to have, what kind of degree is more ideal for this industry?
Yeah, that's a tough question, because we find that people who come into L&D, like me, transitioned into the area, right? They found out they just have a love for helping others, training others, developing others, or just interest in learning about how to learn and design. So they fall into this area usually, but it's not to say you can't. It can't start with educating yourself, which is great. I think the thing that's difficult is the industry doesn't have any standards, or the organizations don't have standards of where learning professionals sit within organizations, whether, like Serene said, in HR, or is there a specific training department, or is it under it could be under so many different things, whether you're a person of one that's just designing things, a whole team, global team that's, coordinating all of these learning efforts with organizations. I think the biggest part is in organizations, usually the compliance training. That's definitely something each organization has to have some sort of training that's regulated and has to be there. But otherwise, we have no idea, where would a coach or facilitator sit, or where would a person who's helping onboarding your new employees sit. It's kind of confusing, but definitely I'm biased with the Association for Talent Development. So
Mhm.
I leverage that nonprofit organization to learn all about the different areas of learning and development. They do have their own certifications, but there are multiple organizations with certifications. Even HR and nonprofits have professional organizations and networks that you can tap into and understand the development side of things. So there's certifications out there, but there's nothing in that matches like the experience that you meet and network with different people. So
Okay. Yeah. So I actually did a little bit of research on this. I find out like a lot of learning and development job position, they're hiring people with more like an education background, and that's okay. But some of them is more area specific. Like if it's in finance, they prefer someone has the finance knowledge or so on and so. And they are just like Julia said, I think that's a very key information here. So if you are from another industry or field and you want to change into learning, there are a lot of certifications, organizations, associations, and a lot of conferences and networking that you can do to change from where you're at to the learning industry.
Yeah, I think, and just adding that is, it's more about the applied, right? So getting the certifications in applied work, applied experience versus just, the basic, background knowledge, right? It's not like chemistry. It's more
Yeah.
like, how do you apply instructional design, right? So that's different way of thinking when you're going into school.
One last question. So in your career, and you enjoy being a coach and you enjoy helping scientists, is there any like a defined moment, like a defining moment for you that you feel like this is definitely what I love to do, and you get the sparkles that, oh, I love this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, I find that scientists are not always the most, they don't just take an idea for granted. They'll challenge it and they'll ask a million questions around it. And that's probably when it's most intriguing for me, because when they start to ask questions of me, they start to trust that there's something worthwhile in what I'm teaching. So whether it's emotional intelligence or, just understanding how to work with people from different cultures or diversity of environments, and they're starting to ask questions, that's when we start to dig further and further and further into understanding how do we work better with each other. So that's when I know there's something there. And yeah, those are light bulb moments for me.
I think for most trainer, coaches, and teachers, the moment you see your students making progress is the most satisfying moment. So today we actually covered a lot of topics, like what is a PhD degree and how can you use it as a tool in different ways? And how did Juliet shift, not exactly shift, like how did she entering learning and explore her career path and right now become the CEO of her own company? And one thing I didn't mention is she is the former president of the ATD New Jersey chapter, right? So if anyone interested in learning development, you can look up different association and to get into this community. I think that is a really good way to first get to know people who work in this field.
Absolutely. And it's a lot of fun. You get to ask a bunch of questions to people who have tons of experience and just figure out your own way. And that's what I did.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, Juliet.
Thanks, Serene.
Bye.
Bye.